You think you could survive a medieval winter? You really believe that with your modern knowledge and determination, you'd make it through 5 months of brutal cold and conditions our ancestors endured every single year? Let me be brutally honest with you, the answer is no, absolutely not. You wouldn't last a month, maybe not even 2 weeks. And I'm not talking about battles or plagues or any of that dramatic stuff. I'm talking about the daily, grinding, relentless reality of medieval winter survival. The kind of survival challenge that kills through cold, starvation, disease, and sheer exhaustion. Every single element of medieval winter life was designed to kill you. The temperature, the darkness, the food scarcity, the impossible labor, the absence of everything you take for granted. And the people who survived did so through knowledge, skills, and physical toughness that you simply don't have and couldn't develop fast enough. This isn't about being soft or lazy. This is about the brutal fact that medieval winter survival required adaptations, physical, mental, and cultural, that modern people have completely lost. Meet Robert, a peasant farmer in northern England, November 1315. Robert is 26 years old, which makes him an experienced adult by medieval standards. He's preparing for winter, his 21st winter, and he knows exactly what's coming. 5 months of cold that will drop to 0 degrees or below. 5 months of darkness where the sun sets at 4:30 p.m. and doesn't rise until 8 a.m. 5 months of rationed food that's never quite enough. 5 months of brutal labor just to maintain the basics of survival. 5 months where a single miss out of firewood, getting your clothes wet, eating spoiled food, catching a respiratory infection can kill you and everyone who depends on you. Robert has survived 20 winters. He's lost family members, and some of them a younger brother at age 4, a grandmother at 52, a neighbor's entire family when their cottage burned down in the middle of January. He knows that winter isn't a season, it's an enemy, a siege that lasts from November through March, and you either have the knowledge and resources to withstand that siege, or you die. There's no middle ground, so let me walk you through exactly what medieval winter survival actually required, not the romanticized version. The real version: brutal, exhausting, and so far beyond modern experience that you'd fail within days. And by the end you'll understand why you wouldn't make it, and why the people who did deserve far more respect than we give them. Robert's winter preparation doesn't start in November. It starts in July, because surviving medieval winter requires 6 months of preparation, gathering, preserving, storing, and organizing everything you'll need when fresh food becomes impossible and outdoor work becomes deadly. Robert spends the entire summer and autumn obsessively preparing. It's not paranoia, it's necessity. Because if your preparation is inadequate, you die. It's that simple. In July, Robert harvests hay from the meadows. This hay isn't for him, it's for his cow. That cow is the difference between survival and starvation. She provides milk through winter, which can be churned into butter and cheese. She produces manure that can be dried and burned as fuel when firewood runs low. And most importantly, she's a living heat source. Her body generates warmth constantly. The cow will live inside Robert's cottage through winter, and her body heat will raise the interior temperature by several degrees. Without the cow, the cottage would be dangerously cold, so the cow must survive winter, which means she needs food. Hay Robert cuts, dries, and stores roughly 3 tons of hay for his 1 cow. 3 tons. That's the amount of feed 1 cow needs to survive 5 months. He cuts this hay by hand using a scythe, a long curved blade on a wooden pole. Swinging a scythe for hours in July heat is brutally hard work. His shoulders burn, his back screams, his hands develop blisters that break and bleed, and he keeps swinging because if he doesn't harvest enough hay, his cow dies, which means he probably dies. In August and September, Robert harvests grain, barley, rye, oats. This grain is food for the family and seed for next year's planting. Every kernel matters. The harvest must be done quickly. If you wait too long, rain can rot the grain in the fields. If you harvest too early, the grain hasn't fully ripened. The timing must be perfect, and you can't control the weather. You work from dawn to dusk, cutting grain with sickles, binding it into sheaves, stacking sheaves to dry, threshing grain from the stalks, winnowing to separate grain from chaff. Robert's family himself, his wife Margaret, and their 2 children ages 8 and 5 work together through harvest. Everyone works. The 8-year-old can bind sheaves and carry water. The 5-year-old can glean, pick up dropped grain stalks. Margaret cuts grain alongside Robert. There are no days off, no breaks except for brief meals. You work until the harvest is complete because your life depends on it. After harvest, Robert must pay his taxes. Roughly a third of his grain goes to the lord who owns the land. This isn't negotiable. Armed men come to collect. Robert has no choice. So from his total harvest of maybe 15 bushels of grain, 5 bushels disappear immediately as tax. He's left with 10 bushels to feed 4 people for 12 months. That's about 2.5 bushels per person per year. Roughly 1 pound of grain per person per day, which will be made into bread, porridge, or soup. It sounds like enough. It's not, because grain is basically your only food source in winter. There's no fresh vegetables, no fruit, very little meat, just grain. 1 pound of grain per person per day for 5 months straight. You'll be constantly hungry. Your body will burn more calories trying to stay warm than that grain provides. You'll lose weight. You'll feel weak. You'll be hungry all the time, but you can't eat more because the grain must last until next harvest. Run out of grain in March and you'll starve for 2 or 3 months before new crops are available. So you ration strictly. You eat the minimum necessary for survival. You go to bed hungry every single night for 5 months. This is normal. This is just how winter works. Robert also preserves other food. In October, he slaughters 1 pig. The family has been fattening this pig all year specifically for this moment. The pig provides roughly 200 pounds of meat. This meat must be preserved immediately because it will spoil within days. Robert and Margaret salted, scrubbing every surface with massive amounts of salt, then packing it in barrels with more salt. The salt draws moisture out of the meat through osmosis. Bacteria need moisture to survive. Remove the moisture and the meat can last months. But this salted meat becomes incredibly hard, almost like wood. It's so salty that you can't eat it without soaking it in water for a day to remove excess salt. And even after soaking and cooking, it's tough, chewy, and still quite salty. But it's protein, it's calories, it's survival. A small piece of this salted pork, added to a pot of vegetable soup, provides flavor and crucial fats that your body desperately needs in cold weather. The 200 pounds of preserved pork must last the entire winter for 4 people. That's roughly 1 pound per week for the family. Maybe 2 ounces of meat per person per week. This isn't daily meat. This is meat once or twice a week, in tiny portions, stretched as far as possible. You'll crave meat constantly. Your body needs the fats and proteins, but you can't have more because it must last. Robert also dries vegetables. Onions are hung in bundles. Turnips are stored in a cool cellar covered with sand. Cabbage is chopped and fermented with salt to make something similar to sauerkraut. He dries mushrooms gathered from the forest. He preserves eggs by coating them in fat or storing them in lime water. Everything that can be preserved is preserved. Because in winter, there is no shopping, no grocery stores, no buying food. You eat what you stored, and when that's gone, you starve by November. Robert has assembled what he hopes is adequate supplies: 10 bushels of grain, 200 pounds of salted pork, dried vegetables, a small amount of cheese, some dried fish, preserved eggs, and 3 tons of hay for the cow. He's also gathered and stored firewood, an enormous amount of firewood. Because fire is survival, Robert needs fire for 3 purposes: cooking, heating, and light. All 3 are essential. Without fire, food can't be cooked, the cottage freezes, and after sunset you're in complete darkness. Fire is life, and fire requires fuel. Wood. Robert has been gathering firewood since summer. Every spare moment after finishing fieldwork, on rest days, whenever possible, he's been cutting and stacking wood. Dead trees from the Lord's forest he's allowed to take deadfall, but not cut living trees. Branches that have fallen in storms. Everything combustible. He's created a woodpile beside his cottage that's roughly 15 feet long, 6 feet wide, and 5 feet high. That's about 450 cubic feet of stacked wood, maybe 5 or 6 tons. This seems like an enormous amount. It's not. Robert's cottage has one fire, a central hearth that burns continuously through winter. In cold weather, that fire might consume 15 to 20 pounds of wood per day. Over 5 months, that's roughly 2.5 to 3 tons of wood. So Robert's 6-ton supply should be adequate, with some margin for especially cold periods or emergencies. But if Robert runs out of wood, his family will freeze. The cottage temperature will drop to outdoor levels. They won't be able to cook. They'll die within days. So Robert obsessively monitors his woodpile through winter, calculating daily how much remains and how much is needed. It's constant stress. The fear of running out haunts him. This is just the preparation. And modern people couldn't do it. Harvesting 3 tons of hay by hand, you don't have the physical strength. Your soft modern hands would be destroyed in a day. Harvesting grain from dawn to dusk for weeks, you'd collapse from exhaustion. Slaughtering and preserving a 200-pound pig, you'd probably get sick from the blood and guts, and you certainly don't know the butchering techniques. Gathering 6 tons of firewood, where would you even start? But let's say somehow magically you completed the preparation. Now winter arrives, and the daily reality of medieval winter survival is so far beyond modern experience that you'd break within days. It's late November. The temperature has dropped to 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Robert's day starts at 5 a.m. in complete darkness. There are no alarm clocks. Your body wakes when it wakes, conditioned by years of the same routine. Robert wakes because he's cold. The fire in the hearth is died down to coals overnight. It was carefully banked to stay alive but produce minimal heat. The cottage temperature has dropped to maybe 30 degrees. You can see your breath inside. Robert doesn't want to get up. He's exhausted. He went to bed hungry. He's still hungry. His muscles ache from yesterday's labor. He's cold, but staying in bed isn't an option. The fire needs attention. The animals need feeding. Work must be done. So Robert forces himself out from under the pile of blankets and straw that's been keeping him barely warm. He's wearing the same clothes he wore yesterday and will wear tomorrow. A rough wool tunic over a linen shirt. wool hose, leather shoes stuffed with straw for insulation. He sleeps in these clothes because undressing would mean exposure to cold air. You don't have pajamas. You don't have a change of clothes. You wear the same outfit for weeks, maybe months. It smells terrible of sweat, smoke, and unwashed body. You don't care. Smell is just smell. Cold kills you. Robert's first task is reviving the fire. He carefully uncovers the banked coals from their ash covering. The coals are still glowing, faintly sick. If they'd died completely, he'd face an hour of work with flint and steel trying to start a new fire. He adds small kindling to the coals and blows gently. The kindling catches, larger pieces of wood are added. Within 10 minutes, the fire is burning. Well, the cottage slowly begins to warm from 30 degrees to maybe 40 degrees. It will never be truly warm, but 40 is survivable. Breakfast is porridge. Every morning, the same porridge. Margaret scoops oats from their grain storage, adds water, puts the pot over the fire. The porridge cooks slowly. The family eats it plain, no sugar, no milk, no butter, no salt even, just oats and water. It's bland, boring, but it's calories. It's warmth in your belly. You eat it because it's what's available. Could you eat plain oat porridge every single morning for 5 months? The same flavorless mush, day after day, week after week. Modern people get bored eating the same lunch 2 days in a row. Medieval people ate the same breakfast for 5 months straight and considered themselves lucky to have it after breakfast. Robert goes outside to work, and this is where modern people would fail immediately, because outdoor work in medieval winter is unlike anything in modern experience. The temperature is 20 degrees. You're wearing wool clothing, but it's not modern technical fabric. It's rough, scratchy wool that provides insulation but not waterproofing. If it gets wet, you're in serious danger because wet wool loses much of its insulating ability. Robert's task today is cutting more firewood. The wood pile is being depleted daily, and he needs to gather more to ensure adequate supply. He walks into the forest with an axe. The axe is iron, poorly made by modern standards, but functional. It's heavy, dull. Using it requires tremendous physical effort. Robert spends 6 hours cutting wood, swinging an axe hundreds of times, dragging logs back to the cottage, splitting logs into smaller pieces. It's brutal physical labor in freezing temperatures. Your hands go numb even through the cloth wrappings you're using as improvised gloves. Your feet are cold in your straw-stuffed shoes. Your face is raw from the wind. Your muscles burn from the constant work, but you keep working because this is survival. This wood will keep your family from freezing. There's no choice, no option to stop when you're tired. You work until the task is complete, or until darkness makes work impossible. Could you do this? Could you spend 6 hours in 20-degree weather swinging an axe, dragging logs, working until your body screams for rest? Modern people struggle to shovel snow from their driveways for 30 minutes. Robert does this all day, multiple days per week, all winter long. While Robert is cutting wood, Margaret is working just as hard inside the cottage. She's grinding grain using a hand mill to heavy stones, one rotating on top of the other. You pour grain between the stones and turn the top stone. It crushes the grain into rough flour. This is hard work. Your shoulders burn, your arms ache. It takes maybe 30 minutes of continuous grinding to produce enough flour for one day's bread. Margaret does this every day, 30 minutes of hard physical labor just to create raw flour. Then she makes dough, kneads it, lets it rise near the fire, shapes it into loaves, and bakes it on hot stones beside the hearth. The entire bread-making process takes 3 hours. She does this daily, because fresh bread is essential. It's the staple food that supplements the morning porridge. Margaret also tends the cow, the pig, and the chickens living inside the cottage. She feeds them, cleans up their waste, makes sure they're healthy. She hauls water from the well maybe 200 yards from the cottage. Water is heavy at pounds per gallon. She needs several gallons per day for cooking, washing, and the animals. That's dozens of pounds of water carried hundreds of yards, multiple times per day, in freezing weather. She does all this while also managing the fire, preparing meals, and watching the younger child who's too young to work outside. Her day is 12 to 14 hours of continuous labor. She's always working, never resting, always cold, always tired, always hungry. Could you do Margaret's job? Could you grind grain by hand for 30 minutes daily? Could you make bread from scratch every day? Could you haul all your water from a well 200 yards away, in freezing weather, for 5 months straight? By late afternoon around 4 p.m. the sun is setting. Darkness comes, and darkness in medieval winter is absolute. No indoor lights, no light pollution. When the sun sets, you're in blackness so complete that you literally cannot see anything. The only light source is the fire in the hearth. Its flickering glow provides maybe 6 feet of visible area. Everything beyond that is darkness. This darkness will last 15 hours from 4:30 p.m. until roughly 8 a.m. the next morning. 15 hours of every day, you're in darkness or dim firelight. What do you do in this darkness? You can't read. Most people are illiterate anyway, and you can't afford candles or lamp oil for light. You can't do detailed work. You can't see well enough. You mostly sit by the fire and wait for morning. You might tell stories. You might repair simple tools by firelight. Mostly you just sit, in the cold, in the dark, waiting. Dinner is soup, every night, the same soup. Vegetables, turnips, onions with barley, and maybe a tiny piece of salted pork for flavor. The soup is thin, watery, not very filling, but it's warm. And warmth matters as much as calories in winter. After dinner, you go to bed. It's maybe 7 p.m. You'll be in bed for the next 12 hours until morning, because there's nothing else to do in the darkness. And staying in bed conserves body heat and energy. The bed is a wooden platform raised 2 feet off the floor. On it is a mattress, a cloth sack stuffed with straw. The straw is lumpy, compressed, infested with fleas. On top of that are a few wool blankets. Not enough. Never enough. The entire family sleeps together. Robert, Margaret, and both children, pressed together for warmth. The cow, pig, and chickens are in the same room, adding their body heat to the cottage. You're sleeping in your clothes under thin blankets in a room that's maybe 35 degrees, with animals 3 feet away. Could you sleep like this? Every night, for 5 months. Modern people struggle to sleep if the room is slightly too warm or the mattress is slightly too firm. You'd be trying to sleep on straw in freezing temperatures with farm animals in the same room. And this is a good day. A day when nothing went wrong. No one got sick. No accidents happened. The weather wasn't too severe. The food didn't run out. This is just normal, routine medieval winter survival. Day after day, week after week, month after month. But let's talk about what happens when things go wrong. Because things always go wrong. And medieval people had no safety net, no backup plan, no emergency services. When disaster struck, you either handled it with your own resources and knowledge, or you died. Robert's neighbor, John, runs out of firewood in January. He miscalculated. His wood pile wasn't large enough. Or maybe he had to use extra wood during an especially cold stretch. Doesn't matter. His fire goes out. His cottage temperature drops to outdoor levels, maybe 5 degrees. Without fire, John can't cook, can't heat water, can't create light. His family is in immediate danger. John begs neighbors for firewood. Robert gives him a small amount, maybe enough for 3 days. But Robert can't give more because his own supply is limited. Other neighbors do the same. Everyone shares a little, but it's not enough. John needs to gather more wood immediately. In January, in 5-degree weather, with snow on the ground, John goes into the forest and tries to gather wood. But everything is frozen, snow-covered, wet. The wood he manages to cut won't burn well, it's too wet. He brings it back, tries to dry it by the meager fire he can maintain with borrowed wood. It's not enough. His family is cold, dangerously cold. John's youngest child, a daughter, age 3, develops a cough. At first it's just a cough, but in the cold cottage, it worsens, becomes a deep, wet cough. The child develops a fever. She's clearly sick, probably pneumonia, though John doesn't know that word. He just knows his daughter is very sick, and there's no doctor, no medicine. Nothing he can do except keep her warm and pray. But he can't keep her warm. He doesn't have enough firewood. The cottage is freezing. The child gets sicker. Within a week, she's dead. 3 years old, died because her father ran out of firewood, which meant the cottage was too cold, which meant a simple respiratory infection became fatal. This happened constantly, all the time. Children died in winter not from some exotic disease, but from the combination of cold and minor illness. The cold weakened their bodies. Minor infections that would be easily treatable today became killers, and there was nothing anyone could do except watch it happen. Could you watch your child die slowly over a week, knowing there's nothing you can do? Knowing that if you just had more firewood she might survive? Could you handle that psychological horror while also still having to work every day to keep everyone else alive? Or let's talk about injury. Robert is cutting wood. The axe glances off a log and bites into his leg. It's not a catastrophic injury, no major arteries hit, but it's a deep cut, maybe 4 inches long and 1 inch deep. Blood is pouring out. There's no hospital, no ambulance, no antibiotics. Robert has to handle this himself. Margaret helps him. They wash the wound with water heated over the fire. They pack it with cloth to stop the bleeding. They bind it tightly, and they pray it doesn't get infected. For the next week, Robert can barely walk. The leg is painful, swollen, oozing. He can't do his normal work, but the work still needs to be done. Margaret tries to do both her work and his. She's utterly exhausted. The children help as much as they can. The family survives on reduced rations because less work means less food gathered. The wound slowly heals. Robert is lucky no serious infection develops, but he'll have a permanent scar and reduced mobility in that leg. This injury will affect him for the rest of his life, and it happened because of one moment of carelessness with an axe. In medieval winter, one small mistake can have permanent consequences. Could you handle an injury like this? Could you treat it yourself with no medical supplies? Could you keep working through the pain because stopping means your family starves? Let's talk about disease. It's February, the hottest month. Food supplies are running low. Everyone is malnourished and weak. Robert develops a fever, chills, aching muscles. He's sick, probably influenza, though again, he doesn't know these terms. For 3 days, Robert is too sick to work. He lies on the bed, shivering under blankets, barely able to move. Margaret does all the work hers and she's terrified because if Robert dies, she and the children probably won't survive. She has no way to support them. They'd become completely dependent on charity, which means they'd likely starve. Robert survives. His fever breaks. He slowly recovers. But he's lost weight he can't afford to lose. He's weak. It takes him 2 weeks to regain his strength. Those 2 weeks of reduced work capacity mean the family falls behind on essential tasks. They're using more of their food reserves because Robert couldn't hunt or gather. The margin between survival and disaster grows thinner. Could you survive influenza with no medicine, no rest, minimal food, in freezing conditions? Modern people take sick days and rest in warm beds with medicine. Medieval people worked through illness because stopping wasn't an option. Many didn't survive. The ones who did were tougher than modern people can comprehend. But perhaps the worst part of medieval winter survival is the psychological toll. The grinding, relentless nature of it. The hunger that never stops. The cold that never stops. The darkness, the fear, the loss, the exhaustion, month after month with no end in sight. You're hungry all the time. You go to bed hungry. You wake up hungry. You eat, and an hour later you're hungry again because the portions are too small. This isn't skipping lunch hungry. This is your body consuming itself hungry. You can feel yourself getting thinner, weaker. You look at your children getting thinner. You know the food supply is limited. You can't give them more. You just have to watch them suffer from hunger while being hungry yourself. You're cold all the time. You wake up cold. You work cold. You eat cold. You go to bed cold. Your fingers and toes are always slightly numb. Your face is raw from wind. Your body is constantly working to generate heat, which makes you even hungrier. You can't remember what warm feels like. True warm. The kind of warm where you're completely comfortable. That doesn't exist in medieval winter. The darkness is oppressive. 15 hours per day in darkness. You can't see the sky. Can't see beyond the 6-foot circle of firelight. We can't do anything productive. You sit in the dark and wait for morning. Day after day. The monotony is crushing. The same darkness, the same waiting, the same nothing. The fear is constant. Fear that you'll run out of food. Fear that you'll run out of firewood. Fear that someone will get sick or injured. The fear that the cow will die. To fear that you'll make a mistake and everyone will suffer. The fear never goes away because the danger never goes away. You're always one accident, one illness, one miscalculation away from disaster, and you watch people die. Your neighbor's child. The old woman 3 cottages down. The young couple who were expecting their first child, both mother and baby died in childbirth in January because the midwife couldn't reach them through a snowstorm. Death is everywhere in medieval winter. Expected. Normal. You become numb to it because you have to. You can't grieve properly for everyone who dies or you'd never stop grieving. Could you handle this psychologically? The hunger, cold, darkness, fear, and death for 5 months straight. Modern people develop serious mental health issues from far less stress. You'd break, your mental health would collapse. You'd become depressed, anxious, possibly suicidal, because you're not adapted to this level of sustained misery. And then finally March arrives. The temperature starts rising. Days get longer. The worst is over. You survived. Barely. You're 20 pounds lighter than you were in November. You've lost muscle mass. You're vitamin deficient. You're exhausted in ways you didn't know were possible. You've watched neighbors die. You've suffered illness. You've been hungry and cold for 5 solid months. And next year you'll do it all again. This isn't a one-time challenge. This is every year. For your entire life. November through March. 40 years, 50 years if you're lucky. You'll face this winter survival challenge 40 times before you die. It never gets easier. You just get more experienced at suffering. Robert survived this winter. He'll probably survive next winter. He's adapted physically and mentally to this life. His body is conditioned to hard labor and minimal food. His mind is structured around endurance and acceptance. He expects suffering. He doesn't expect comfort or security. He just expects to keep working and hope it's enough. You don't have these adaptations. You expect comfort. You expect adequate food. You expect warmth and light and safety. You expect medical care when you're sick. You expect help when you're in trouble. None of that exists in medieval winter. It's just you, your knowledge, your physical capability, and whether you prepared adequately, and you didn't prepare adequately. You don't know how. You don't have the skills to harvest 3 tons of hay by hand. You can't preserve 200 pounds of pork properly. You don't know which wood burns best or how to fell a tree safely. You can't grind grain efficiently or make bread without yeast. You don't know how to treat injuries or survive illness without medicine. Your body would fail first. You're not strong enough for the labor. Your hands are too soft. Your back isn't conditioned for swinging an axe for hours. You'd injure yourself within days and have no way to heal properly. Or you'd get sick and have no immunity to medieval diseases your body has never encountered. But honestly, your mind would probably break before your body. The hunger, cold, darkness, isolation, fear, and hopelessness would destroy your mental health. You'd become depressed and unable to function. You'd give up, because you're not psychologically structured for this level of sustained suffering. This is why you wouldn't make it. Not because you're weak though by medieval standards, you are, but because medieval winter survival required specific knowledge, physical conditioning, and mental frameworks that you don't have and couldn't develop fast enough. You'd fail, almost certainly within a month, possibly within a week. Robert survived because this was normal for him, because he'd been doing this since childhood, because his body and mind were adapted to these conditions, because he had no alternative. He survived or he died. So he survived. You have alternatives. You have modern life to compare this to. You know what you're missing. That knowledge would break you. Every miserable moment, you'd be aware of the heated house, abundant food, medical care, light, safety, comfort that you've lost. That awareness would be unbearable. So next time you complain about winter, about the cold, about the dark mornings, remember Robert. Remember that he endured conditions you couldn't survive for weeks. Remember that he did this every year for his entire life. Remember that this was normal, not exceptional heroism. Just normal life for millions of people for thousands of years. And be grateful, profoundly grateful, that you'll never have to face the test that Robert faced every single winter. Because you'd fail that test. We'd all fail that test. And that's okay, we don't have to pass it anymore. Our ancestors passed it for us, over and over, generation after generation, until we finally developed technology that made winter survivable without suffering. Honor them by understanding their truth. They didn't live romantic adventures. They endured brutal, grinding survival challenges that would destroy us. They were tougher than we are, stronger than we are, more resilient than we are, not because they were better humans, but because their world demanded it and our world doesn't. If you want more brutal, honest truths about medieval survival, the real challenges, not romanticized fantasies, subscribe now. These stories matter because they show us what humans can endure, what our ancestors actually faced, what survival really cost. Robert and millions like him deserve to be remembered accurately, not as quaint historical figures, but as survivors of conditions we can barely imagine. Remember them, honor them, and never forget that you wouldn't make it through what they endured every single winter of their entire lives.